Hello, everybody. Welcome to A Slice of Life with Kellie and Jon. And today we have a very interesting guest, Erik Briones, who is the president and CEO of Minerva Canna, which is a medical cannabis producer. Did I get that right? No, I didn't.
Medical and adult use.
Okay. Medical and adult use, recreational, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And cannabis is now a stage 3. How do they do it?
They've got it in a category 3, I believe, and it's going to go to 1, or it's in a 1.
No, it's in 1 and it's going to 3. Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Which means it's not as
bad as heroin or cocaine or any of the other heavy
dangerous drugs or whatever. Yeah. And so what excites me about it is I'm not a cannabis user. I tried it a couple times in my mid-30s and it just didn't do much for me. But I hear a lot about people who are using it for as a cream for pain relief. And so I'm interested in that because as I age, my knees are really messed up. So I'm definitely interested in hearing how it can help us. And then, of course, you read a lot and hear a lot about its effects. And if you look at the statistics, more people are killed in accidents related to alcohol than cannabis use. And so it seems a little weird that cannabis is illegal and alcohol is legal. So
I don't know if there's any number of people who have
who have been killed from.
Willie Nelson used to say the only way you can get killed by cannabis is if a bale of it falls on you. You know,
because it makes you unmotivated. It makes you not want to do anything, right? It's just
and then nobody's ever OD'd from it either.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah, so it's weird. It's funny how, I'm sure everything to do with lobbyists, of why it's taken so long for it to become legal. And, just from reading, it seems like the alcohol industry has had a lot to do with keeping it illegal. And I'm sure you know more about it, Erik, than I.
So, just for clarity, it's not illegal in the states that have approved it either for recreational use or medical use.
Okay.
And even the federal government doesn't really recognize it as illegal anymore. They just have a lot of barriers around it still. And they're starting to come down. But, if you're operating in a state that has legal, medical, or recreational, or both, it's not illegal. In New Mexico here, the laws are getting broader and broader that you can have more and more cannabis on you if you get stopped. And now the police aren't even... it's almost not a crime anymore. It's a misdemeanor. Maybe it's a parking citation. Maybe if they can prove that you're high on cannabis, which they really don't have a test to be able to do that. So they're really starting to look the other way. Unless you have your back seat's full of it, then they're going to question you. But the average guy or girl that is pulled over and the officer smells cannabis, they're not going to do anything anymore.
Well, why don't you tell the people about, I've heard, I think it's from, how you run things because they're regulated fairly well. And there's a saying that, it's covered from seed to sale. Is that how it's said?
So here's because there's a tremendous amount of regulation and compliance and record keeping, and it's just deep, and it affects every facet of what we do and how we do it. So what happens with us is as soon as we pop a seed, right, we grow that plant up, but we usually, let's say we pop 500 seeds and we grow those plants up to a certain size, and then we'll put them in we'll change their photo period. We'll put them in a 12 daylight, 12 nighttime period for a couple of weeks, and it'll tell us who's a male and who's a female. So we get rid of the males, because the males, if you let them live, will pollinate. And then when we're harvesting the flower, we've got seeds in the flower, and that's no good. So we get rid of the males and we're stuck with the females. As soon as that female is about 6 inches tall, we have to put a barcode on it. And that's when we start tracking it. And so we'll take that plant and we'll plant it in the greenhouse or outside, It's all barcoded. We can clone off of that and then create another barcode for that clone. And that barcode will follow that plant all the way to sale. So we'll take that plant, we'll harvest it. If it's really good flower, it goes to the store as flower. If it's not as premium as we want, we'll make it into joints. We'll melt it into oil. The oil will go into our baked goods, but that barcode follows that plant all the way through until end user.
Got it.
Wow.
Yeah, it's very extensive. We get a lot of inspections, and they're picky. They're like,
Well, heavily regulate the alcohol industry too.
Yeah.
So, that's understandable that they are, being that regulated. But
yeah,
my
I mean,
question
sometimes
is,
these guys come by and you're like, get out of my refrigerator. It's none of your business.
yeah, they can be very invasive.
Yep, very invasive.
But as things loosen up, I'm sure the regulations will a little bit too. But still, we've come a long way. I just remember a long time ago when I was in school, and throughout my whole life, I've never known anybody who wanted to buy marijuana to smoke, that didn't find a way to buy it. I mean, it's always been available, and easy to access. And I know people have always done it if they wanted to. Like I said, I'm really an outsider of it. It wasn't my thing ever. But I've, been around people who smoke pot, and they've always had access to it, and it's never been an issue. So,
Well, and they still do, right?
Yeah.
And they still have a lot of access to illegal, unregulated cannabis, because these states like New Mexico and pretty much everybody else, they put a tax on it, right? And so the tax is pretty heavy. By the time I put gross receipts tax on it and then a cannabis tax, they're paying 21 to 28% tax on every purchase. Well, the guy down the street doesn't have a tax. So our biggest competitor is the black market. And these states that put these big tax burdens on the sale of legal cannabis, all they're really doing is promoting the black market to thrive. And we keep telling this to the states, and they just don't listen. And so that is the reality we live in. The black market is absolutely thriving. We're doing well. The regulated cannabis business is doing well, but our biggest competitor is still the black market.
well, I would think, okay, so let's say I want marijuana, and so I have a choice to buy it on the black market or buy it legally. Wouldn't I want to buy it legally so I don't get in trouble?
Well, again, the laws are so loose now that there's nobody gonna. If you got stopped and the officer says, "Where'd you get that?" You can just say you
There's
got
no
from
proof,
any
right?
legit place. But the difference is that legal cannabis through a licensed producer or a licensed distributor, that cannabis is tested. It's tested not only for potency of a lot of things, THC, CBD, CBN, CBG, but it's also tested for pesticides, residuals of pesticides, insects, molds, and fungus. So it's a very stringent test, right? And so if you're not growing organically or growing very carefully, your test will fail, and then you can't do anything. You've got to destroy it. Luckily, we always grow organically, or at least with organic derived products, so we don't fail tests. But the black market doesn't.
Who does the test, Eric?
What's that?
Who does the tests?
A third-party lab does it. So we're not allowed to test in-house. Okay, so it's got to be a non-biased test.
So now, technically, you have to pay that third party, and in order to keep a quarterly qualification, you have to show this.
So the way it works is that we'll send a sample to the lab with the BioTrack or the barcode number on it. They will test it. If it passes, they enter that number into the system, statewide system, that then allows us to sell it. If it doesn't pass the test, they're not allowed to enter that product into the system, and you can't sell it.
Wow. Okay, that's another thing. Over the years, I've always heard these names of strains.
Right.
How, And then even over the years, seeing different dispensaries selling the same strain. Is that really possible?
Absolutely.
How do they know that?
So here's the way there's so many players in the market right now, and there's players that are growers, there's players that are breeders and producers, and they extractors, and like us, we're vertically integrated. So we grow it, we extract it, we make edibles, we make drinks, we make chocolate bars, we make the flower, we make joint. I mean, we just do the whole vertical. Anything you can think of cannabis, we produce it in house. But when you get into somebody who's a breeder, and a lot of people can breed, you got a male and a female, you cross pollinate them, you know what, you got a new strain. And I swear, I think that there's 500 new strains developed a day. Yeah, and it's crazy, right? But a lot of these breeders are really very selective, and they really are trying to get the highest THC possible, or whatever they're going for, CBG, CBN, or a mixture of all of those things. But there's so much breeding, and so what happens is you get these strains that they can, they'll cross Girl Scout cookies with orange, Agent Orange, and now you've got Agent Cookies. There you go.
Kind of like roses, when they have all the different breeds of roses, different kinds of.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's exactly the same thing. So you can't even keep up with it. But some of the breeds gain momentum. And so you'll see, that's why you've heard of, the cookies strains, or the Kushes, or in the past, Acapulco Gold, the Colombian strains. And so they've gained momentum, and then the breeders really do a good job of marketing these things. But, you Cinderella 99, I mean, the list is just endless. And right. So us as growers, what we try to do is every time we do a new grow, especially our outdoor, and because we're growing about 8,000 plants, we try to grow 30 to 50 different strains that we didn't grow last year, just because of the variety. And because when we have a customer or a patient come to one of our dispensaries, we have 7 around the state, there's generally 2 questions that they ask. What do you have that's the highest in THC, and what do you have that's new? And so, we've got to strive for the high THC and always have new flavors on the shelf. The problem with the THC is
let people know, folks, those of you who know me, I am completely unlike Kelly. I have enjoyed using marijuana since a long time ago, and have found benefits in it. So the point is, if I'm not mistaken, the percentage numbers for the people who don't know, when people are looking for high amounts of THC, we're talking around like 25, 27%. Is that correct? Higher than that?
Yeah. I mean, it would, honestly, if we have something that doesn't test at least above 20, we'll make that into oil.
Okay.
Right. Because we're striving for 25 plus up to 35.
Wow.
Right. But that's kind of the thing that is, to me, as a grower and as a plier, it aggravates me, because people are just after that big hit, and they're failing to look at the terpene profile, which gives you the effects, right? And a lot of medical effects are in the terpene profile, and all of the different cannabinoids that are in cannabis, and they just want to get stoned. They just want to get blottoed. And I'm like, why, you guys? Why do you just need to get high? Why don't you enjoy the effects and the flavor and the aroma? And I think the really big connoisseurs of cannabis are really starting to look for, how does it taste? How does it make me feel? It's all going to get me high. Why do I need something that's 35% when I'm going to get pretty much just as high at 22%? And what's the flavor profile of it, right?
Well,
So
So can I be
it's kind of a
stupid and
little
ask
bit,
some dumb questions? So the
Oh.
THC is what makes you high,
yes.
and there's some cannabis that they sell that doesn't have that, though, right?
So very low percentages, and there's a lot of cannabis, but it's really hemp that has CBD in it, and CBD's got tremendous medicinal purposes, and properties and benefits, and it'll help you relax and help you with anxiety and stress and stuff like that. One of our favorite products that our customers like is a balance, right? It's 50% THC, it's 50% CBD. So they're getting high, but they're getting the benefit of CBD. So they're getting relaxed or reducing their anxiety. And so we'll put that in a vape pen. We'll sometimes grow a strain like that and roll it into joints. But a lot of times we'll also do it into the edibles that we make.
Why don't you also explain the primary difference of sativa and indica?
Oh,
So let's go back, right? Let's go way, way, way back. So when cannabis was really starting to come in, the 50s, right? A lot of things were like the Hindu Kushas that were the indicas, which bring you down. Think of it. I'm going to smoke a joint. I'm going to lay on the couch and watch TV, and then eat a bowl of ice cream. Or the sativas, which come from Afghanistan, which bring you high. So you smoke a joint. I'm going to change the sheets, vacuum the floor, and go mow the lawn, right? But there's those sativas also make people anxious, and it gives them anxiety. And so you'll see that a lot of people that say, "Oh, I tried cannabis. I smoked it a long time. I didn't like the way it made me feel. It made me too antsy, too, kind of paranoid, right?"
Yeah.
And so now everything is a hybrid. It's some mixture of an indica and a sativa that has been cross-pollinated and cross-pollinated and cross-pollinated, and everything is kind of a hybrid. They can be sativa dominant or indica dominant, but it is a hybrid. It's really hard to say this is a pure sativa or a pure indica that's got none of the other in it, right?
Is there any way to do a DNA test, but obviously not human DNA, but would the plants have a DNA that would?
Yeah, they do. They have a terpene profile. And there's a DNA test that also can be done there too. But, a lot of times we rely on the breeders. If they're breeding an indica with an indica, it's indica dominant, right? If they're breeding a sativa dominant with a sativa dominant. But again, a lot of these breeders, and I got to give them credit for this, they're going for the flavor profile, they're going for the terpene profile, and they're going for the effects.
Nice.
Right?
Nice. Why don't you? Oh, go ahead, Kelly. Were you going to say
well,
something?
I'm a little behind here. So THC and CBD, are they the same as the sativa and the indica?
They can be in both. Yes.
Are they like, is one of them more potent than the other?
Well,
it depends
difference?
on the percentage
What
of
are
the
they?
plant.
Okay.
Right? It's like, so we'll grow sometimes a plant. Oh, we used to have a strain called Black Dahlia, and it was pretty low in THC. It had like 11%, but it had 15% CBD. It was almost a 50-50. And I loved it, because I don't really get high. I don't really smoke. At occasion, if there's a party or something and one of my friends has got a joint, I'll take a hit. But I eat our gummies that we make to help me sleep. And that's my consumption of cannabis. But I used to smoke a lot, when I was younger. But a lot of people, they're looking for what is the percentage of THC, CBD. Now, as cannabis gets deregulated and rescheduled, you're going to see the pharmaceutical companies get a hold of this plant, grow it, and tear apart the cannabinoid profile. And they're going to say, okay, here's a plant that's got a lot of CBN in it. And so
what is CBN? Explain the CBN.
Yeah. So CBN is the cannabinoid that's really responsible for rest, relaxation, and possibly sleep, right? So you're going to see these pharmaceutical companies come out, tear this plant apart, really develop these plants that are high in the cannabinoid that they want. And I'm going to bring back CBN. And they're going to be starting to make sleep aids out of the pure CBN. And then they'll find out, I mean, there's hundreds of cannabinoids in the cannabis plant, but they're in very small, minute quantities. But they'll figure out a way to propagate these, mass scale them, mass produce them, and then make new pharmaceutical sleep aids, health aids, whatever, out of this cannabis plant. The only reason it hasn't happened is because it's Scheduled 1, and they really won't let companies research it.
Wow.
In America. But the Israelis and the Spanish have been doing research on cannabis for years, and they're just years and years ahead of us in the research of the cannabinoid profile in cannabis. But we're going to catch up as soon as it gets descheduled.
So,
So I'm still back on the THC and the CBD. What are the effects? How are the effects different?
So THC is going to get you high.
Okay,
That's
going to get you high.
the psychotropic effect.
Okay.
That's what's going to get you high. Whether it's going to get you high as a sativa and make you paranoid, or go mow the lawn, or put you in the couch as an indica. But it's all about the THC profile. But there's more cannabinoids in there, right? So there could be multiple effects. But we're going to look at the pure the pure sativa, the pure indica, and those are the effects. But whatever's getting you high, it's THC.
Okay, and then what does CBD do?
CBD, if you smoked it, it will relax you. It's going to kind of a little bit get you high, but it's not going to get you stoned. But it really will relax you.
I believe, and again, correct me if I'm wrong, the big use of CBDs is in balms or oils for people who have hip problems, knee problems, elbows.
Yeah, that's what I want to know about. What does that do?
So we make a balm that's just a beautiful thing, right? It's a salve, really, and so it's a little bit. It's not more. It's a little bit more than a little bit. It's 100 milligrams of THC. It's 100 milligrams of CBD. It's also got essential oils. It's got arnica in it. It's got CBN. It's got CBG. These micro or these smaller concentrates of the cannabinoids. But then we'll put in essential oils like rosemary oils and some of these other essential oils. We make this into a balm. And I love talking to people about this balm because they don't, you get a non-believer. And I love having these conversations where they go, okay, well, what hurts? Oh, well, they go, well, I've got arthritis in my wrists. I'm like, and it hurts right now? Yep, it hurts right now. I was like, great. Put this on, rub it in. You don't need a lot of it. You put it on kind of like Vaseline or a lotion, just rub it in. I said, just give it a little bit of time. And we'll continue the conversation. And literally a minute later, I'll say, how's your wrist? And they go, oh my God, it doesn't hurt anymore. It's amazing how quickly it'll take the pain away. And you have to reapply. You got to reapply every couple of hours. But it's a topical that will take the pain away, especially surface pain. If you've got, if you got something deep inside of you, it's not going to help you. But if you got a surface pain that a topical will work, it's an amazing product. It's one of our
work on knees. Like when I go up and downstairs, my knees just start hurting. And I don't need surgery. I've gone and gotten x-rays and everything. They said it's just an old injury. I was a cheerleader for many years and I bounced and jumped. I did aerobics and I've just injured my knees, wore them out or whatever. And it hurts.
My parents, I unfortunately lost both of my parents last year. But they used it for their knees. My dad used it for his neck and his back. And then they got all their friends on it. So they were like a little drugstore selling it to all their elderly friends. And they just kept ordering it.
Oh.
Erik, when I first met you, if I'm not wrong, I believe you just had your first store, your one store in Albuquerque, but now you've expanded. Why don't you tell everybody about Minerva Canna and where you are?
So we have 7 stores. And if you're familiar with New Mexico, from Los Lunas to Las Vegas. So basically up and down the I-25 corridor. Our grow facility and our big production facility where we do extractions and edibles and we process everything that we grow, that's just outside of Albuquerque. And so we do outdoors and greenhouse growing. But we're a vertically integrated company. So we make about 90% of the products that we sell.
How many employees do you have?
100 and something employees. I lose track. There's a lot of bodies running around.
That's fantastic.
So we're going to give people your website. Can someone order products from your website, or is that illegal? Do they have?
It's illegally, it's illegal to send it across state lines. Okay. But if you're ever in New Mexico, come see us. Right, we're downtown Santa Fe. We got a couple of stores in Santa Fe. One beautiful store downtown Santa Fe. It kind of caters to the tourists, but man, do we make a lot of tourists happy.
Awesome. Yeah.
But it's funny, the John, I told John my story of how I got into this business. And if we got time, I'll tell you how I got into it.
How? What happened?
A funny thing. So I used to be in the nursery industry, right? I used to have a number of garden centers, and I got out of that in 08 and 09 when the economy tanked and all the banking fell apart and everything. Everybody had a hard time then. So I got out of those things and I kind of retired for a couple of years. And I took one of the greenhouses that I had at one of our facilities and I put it up in my property that I had 5 acres on. So I put a greenhouse there and I was growing organic heirloom tomatoes and organic basil. And I was selling it to a bunch of restaurants around Albuquerque and Corrales and stuff. And I was thinking about getting into the cannabis business. Now, this is 14 years ago. It was dangerous getting into the cannabis business back then. Right. But I was thinking about it. It had just started in New Mexico. There was a lot of talk about it nationally. There was a lot of talk about it locally and statewide. And I was taking my son to school. He was, I don't know, he was 15 or years old or something like that. And there was another news story on the radio, and we were listening to it. And, as soon as that was over, my son goes, "Dad, that's what you should get into." Oh. He goes, "You know how to grow plants. I have a degree in horticulture." He goes, "You know how to run a business." He goes, "It's perfect for you." I said, Garrett, Garrett, you're right. I've been thinking about it. It's just, it was edgy back then. I mean, the feds could come in and take your car, your house, your bank accounts. I mean, it was edgy. It was scary. And so that happened. And just ironically, a few days later, a friend of mine from Santa Fe, I was living in Albuquerque at the time. A friend of mine from Santa Fe calls me up out of the blue and he goes, "Erik, I want to talk to you. I've got some friends up in Santa Fe that want to start a business and they need somebody like you. I want to talk to you." So I said, "Come on over." So he comes over to my house. We have a beer, talk about what's going on. He goes, "There's this group of guys in Santa Fe and they need a horticulturist because they want to start a cannabis business." I said, "I've been thinking about it too." Wow. So I come up to Santa Fe. I meet with these guys and I liked them. They're nice people. So we meet again. I was like, "All right, I'm in." So for $25,000 buy-in, I had a quarter of the company, right? And one night we're talking and they go, "Wouldn't it be great if you got a license also?" And I said, and then they got a license, we all got a license. I said, "Yeah, we'd have 2." And it'd be super. I said, "I was thinking about that." So they go, "We'll give you our application and you can copy it." So I took this thick, it must have been 400 pages that they had done. And back then when the state was getting, they were allowing licenses because they would like start and stop and start and stop. So they were open to issuing some more licenses. So they gave me that application and I looked at the 13 categories that the state wanted you to address in your application. And it was so vague. It was things like, tell us about your security. Tell us about your packaging. Tell us about how you're going to grow. Tell us about if you're going to do edible. It was just vague. So I looked at these guys' application and it was all they did is they went online and they said security plans. Oop, that one looks good. Print. There's our security plan.
Right.
Packaging. Oh, that looks good. That sounds good. Packaging. And I'm like, this is garbage. I literally took their application and threw it in the trash can. And so I treated my application like a job because I wasn't working. I was growing tomatoes and basil.
Huh?
And so I treated it like a job. And so for 8 to 5, 5 days a week, I read about cannabis, I researched it, and I addressed the different categories in the application. So after 6 months, I set off my first draft of 186 pages. And I sent it to the state, and I waited and I waited and I waited and I waited about 3 months. And they said, okay, we need some more information on these 4 categories. I'm like, okay. That took me, same kind of treatment, like a job. And I did that for another month and sent them another 50 or 60 pages. Waited another month or 8 weeks or whatever. And they said, okay, we're almost there. We need information on one more category, security. I'm like, okay, so another week, a lot more pages. And I waited and I waited. And at the time, I was a ski instructor at the Santa Fe ski area because I needed something to do besides grow basil and tomatoes. and I've been skiing my whole life. So I remember on December 28th, I get a phone call from the department. At that point, it was the Department of Health. It was the regulatory department. And the guy calls me and he leaves a message because I'm teaching. And I'm like, and the cell phone coverage was terrible on the mountain. And I was carpooling. And I'm like, come on, you guys, let's go. We got to go. I want to get down the hill. Because they said, you need to call us back by the end of the day. And I just rushing these people. I got literally down to the point of the mountain where I could make a phone call. And I called them. It was like 4 minutes after 5, but they answered. And the guy I was working with, he goes, just want to let you know, we've approved Minerva Canna for cannabis license. It was like winning the Willy Wonka golden ticket back then. Wow. They were so rare. They were so hard to get, and they were so hard sought after. And so that's the way I got into it. And then I started in a warehouse, one building, and then the next space became available, and I got that, and I got that. And after a few years, I had the whole control of the whole warehouse, and we just grew organically. So I started with, when we first started, I bought a little Mini Cooper, and the state would not let you have patients back then come to your store. So we would take phone calls, and my driver guy would go and take 6 orders. And by the time he came back, there was 4 or 5 or 6 more waiting. So he was just running back and forth. And then they eased their restrictions a little bit. We opened our first dispensary on 4th Street in Albuquerque. And the state at the time really wanted you to regulate how often you saw the patients and really wanted to control this, right? So we would have people call us and we would schedule them every 15 minutes into our shop. And then I started really digging into the rules and regs. I'm like, it doesn't really say that anywhere that we've got to schedule them. So we were the first company that just said, you know what? We're open for business from this time to this time. And you come in whenever you want to. As soon as we did that, every single morning before we opened, there was 30 people waiting for us to open. So
it was just medical at the time.
It was just medical. So
they needed to also, before they can go there, they were required to fill out their own application, pay their money, and get their license.
To get a prescription from
permit, doctor, right? Or whatever it would be.
They had a card. They had the medical card. And those were hard to get. You had to go to a doctor and somebody that could qualify you, and there weren't that many of them. And it was hard for them to get their licenses too. We would go to all these meetings with the board the advisory board to the Department of Health that says, okay, we want Crohn's disease to be on there. We want, cluster migraines to be on there. And no matter what their regulations, sometimes the state would say yes, but many times they would say no. That's not a qualifying condition. So slowly, the qualifying conditions increased and the amount of patients increased. But, we first started to be able to grow 90 plants for the licensing fee of $90,000 a year.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
And then they increased it to 150 plants at $90,000 a year. And then they increased it to 450 plants. And
Who gets that money? Where does that money go?
To the state.
What's that?
Licensing fees. Where does that money go?
The money went to support the program at the state level, to pay the salaries.
But all the regulations.
All the regulations. And now the money just goes into the general fund.
Here's an interesting question. Especially in states with recreational and medicinal. You walk into a store. I have a card. Is the product I'm going to buy on my medicinal card the same product I could buy as or let me go the other way. I do not have a card. Would I be able to get is there a product that is specifically medical that I would not be able to get?
So if you have a card, you can buy everything.
Okay.
If you don't have a card, there is a regulation on the amount of THC that could be in any one product. And for recreational uses, the most THC that could be in any one product is 100 milligrams of THC. Okay. But on a medical, if you have a medical card, you can go up to 1,000.
Wow.
Right. Wow. So
wait a minute. And the difference would be, recreationally, I would pay, like you said, something like 20+% in taxes, where in medical, I would just pay a normal, whatever the normal tax rate would be.
No tax. You pay no tax. There's no cannabis excise tax and there's no gross receipts tax because New Mexico, a number of years back, said cannabis is a medicine. And in New Mexico, there's no tax on medicine.
Wow.
So I always encourage patients to keep your card. Because, continue to do that because it opens up your availability of products to everything that can be produced. However, 1,000 milligram chocolate bar, which we make, or 1,000 milligram drink is in 10 squares. So think every square is 100 milligrams. If I took one of those squares, I would be in a coma.
Yes.
I would not be able to get out of bed.
I mean, for an edible, normal is 10 milligrams, maybe 15.
Right.
You've been doing it for quite a while.
Right.
But 10 milligrams is your normal dosage on a edible.
That's our standard, right? We always look exactly. That's our standard. We always base everything on 10 milligrams. So if we make chocolate bars or gummies, or even when we make fresh baked goods like blueberry cheesecake, we have to do this, right? We score that blueberry cheesecake, which is about 3.5 inches by 3.5 inches. We score it in 4 pieces, in half and in half, so that we know that 10 milligrams is in every square. Now, you're probably going to say, how do we know that 10 milligrams is in every square? Let me explain that to you. So what we do is we make what's called a distillate. And so we soak cannabis, the bud and stuff that's, it's not top quality that's going to go into the stores on the shelves. It's second tier. So we soak that in ethanol alcohol and dry ice. And what that does is it strips all the trichomes off the cannabis plant. So you're going to say, what's a trichome? If you look at cannabis flower under not even a microscope, but a 50 power lens, you'll see that all of these beautiful little white things, they look like a golf ball on a tee, right? And they're like hairs, but it looks like a golf ball on a tee. And they're all over the flower. And that's where everything's at. That's where all the THC, CBD, all the cannabinoids are in those trichomes. Wow. So the ethanol and the dry ice strips the cannabis of all of the trichomes, and it makes it into it's ethanol. So you make that, right? So then we take that ethanol and we put it in what's called a rotovape. And this is a laboratory piece of equipment. So we put it in a big beaker, we pour it in there, it spins, we've got chillers and all this glass work. You have to see it to really understand it, but it goes through columns and it evaporates the ethanol out and then chills it and puts the vapor back into a liquid form. And then we recollect pure ethanol. Okay. And then we can reuse that. We don't get 100% of it, but we get the majority of it back. So then we're left with something that looks like molasses. It's a very thick slurry. So then
I was thinking the same thing, like a slurry. Go ahead.
it's a slurry, right? So then we take that and we run that through a set of lab equipment, which is called short path distillation. And through heat and through vacuums and through cooling, more dry ice, we evaporate all what's remaining of the ethanol, but we're also taking out all the pure cannabinoids and we're we're pulling out all the THC. And then it's a complicated process, but there's different beakers, right? And so by weight and by temperature, these elements that's in this slurry separate. So we take away all the impurities, and what we're left with is a very pure THC distillate. And then we'll run that process again because we want it super pure. And
Wow.
so then what we're left with is about 92 to 95% pure THC. Okay. And that's called the distillate. Then we take that distillate and we get it tested at a third-party lab. And they come back and they say, okay, it's 92%. So let's remember that number, 92%. Okay. So now we're in the bakery and we want to let's make brownies. Okay. And we know that we're going to take a sheet of brownies for us is 35 pieces. Okay. Because every time we make a sheet of anything, it's 35 pieces the way we cut it. So we take that number of 35. I made this matrix years ago. We take this number of 35 pieces. We take the number of the test results of 92% THC. And then let's say that we want every brownie to have 50 milligrams of THC. Let's make it easier. Let's make it 40 milligrams. So we got 35 brownies, 92% distillate, and we want every brownie to have 40 milligrams of THC. So through this matrix, it says, okay, because of that distillates, your quantities, you need 1.78 grams of that distillate put into your mix that's going to make 35 brownies. We do that. We blend it all around in a big commercial blender. We pour it, we bake it, we cut it. And then we used to get it tested, right? And so we used to get these brownies tested. And, we wanted them to have 40% THC. They would come in at 39%, 41%. It's really close to that target of 40.
You can't get an exact number.
Right. But some of them hit 40,
Okay.
but it's really close. So we're not going to underdose somebody. It's not going to have 10, and it's also not going to have 70, right? And we've been doing this for so many years, and that's the way we make every single edible that we make. Then we'll
have no clue of that scientific process that you have to go through,
right,
in order to make that product.
So then we'll take that distillate that we know now we've got 1.72 grams, right? And we'll put that in melted butter and we'll homogenize it so that THC sticks to the butter molecule. Then we'll take that butter and we put the butter into the mix and it all gets mixed up. But we'll do that with gummies, with chocolate bars, with drinks, with everything we do. That's the way it's dosed, and we're very accurate with it.
So does the THC, the additive, change the flavor? Like if I ate a piece of blueberry cheesecake, would it taste like blueberry cheesecake?
Yes, because of the pure distillate, right? Because of the pure distillate and the concentration of THC in it, it is almost undetectable. Our edibles are almost undetectable with cannabis. Now, so let me back up just a little bit, right? So before we did the short path distillation, that black slurry used to be, it is called something called Rick Simpson oil. And that was hugely, and it still is, beneficial for medical patients. When you hear that cannabis cured cancer with some people and really cured a lot of things, they're talking about that Rick Simpson oil because it's got all of the qualities of the plant. It's got all the cannabinoids. It's got all the terpenes. It hasn't been distilled out of it yet. And we'll sell that in a syringe, that you would squirt on a cracker or whatever. It tastes terrible. It's horrible. It tastes so much like cannabis, but it really has amazing healing qualities. But aside from the Rick Simpson oil, our edibles almost have indistinguishable cannabis taste, but you get all of the impact of it.
Wow, that's awesome.
Well,
that's.
I think you need to. I think you need to take a short flight down to Santa Fe one day.
Come on. Love to have you guys.
Yeah.
Me? I just want the balm for my knees. I'm not big. Give me a strawberry margarita and I'm happy.
So we make a canarita.
Okay.
We make a canarita.
With strawberries. Yeah. I can put strawberries in it too.
You can do whatever. You can put tequila or not. You're going to get a thing. A couple of weeks ago, we had this amazing event here at our house, in that we partnered with a guy out of New York, the Apothecary Club. So we put on a dinner. We hired a chef, put on a dinner for 26 people, and everything was dosed, but you got to pick what your dose was. So you could go 0 milligrams, 3, 7, or 13 in everything that we served. And it was a 4-course meal. We served canaritas at the beginning. Beautiful dinner. There were some people, there was photographers. It's on our website. It was a gorgeous thing. And then at the end of the dinner, which had really great conversation about cannabis and other things, thoroughly enjoyed. Then we had a bus that took everybody to the symphony. So everybody's fairly high. They're not driving. They're totally responsible. And they got to experience this beautiful symphony at a different level. Like all of your senses are opened with this cannabis. Like it just engulfed you. And everybody loved it. The symphony was gorgeous. The people were just high enough that they weren't blottoed, but they were able to soak it in as a different experience. And they came back to the house. We had cannolis for dessert. We talked a little bit more and everybody went home. And now everybody can't wait for us to do another one. So now what we're going to do is a bigger dinner, probably 50 people, with a friend of mine as a flamenco dancer here at the house. So we don't have to leave. And their whole flamenco troupe.
Let me know when that is and I'll fly in for that one.
Yeah, it's going to be a really special thing.
So, let me ask you, I know this isn't going to air for a few weeks, but tomorrow is Cinco de Mayo in Santa Fe. Is that a big day for Minerva Canna?
Now, people are more into the margaritas, but we did put our canarita on sale.
Yeah, there you go. There you go.
There you go. Well, this is great. Thank you so much for educating our audience. That's what's most important.
That's what I was
It's my pleasure, and it's all about education. Yep. And one thing I will tell the audience is, if you're going to try an edible for the first time, go low and go slow. Like don't take, for God's sakes, don't take 100 milligram chocolate bar and wolf it down. You want to start with 3 to 5 milligrams and give it at least an hour, if not an hour and a half, before you go, this isn't working. I mean, that's going to be like being on a very fast train that you can't get off of, and it's not going to be a pleasant experience.
You're right.
Low and slow.
Advice. And that's all I'll say. I just believe that everything that you gave us was the best advice that I could have.
Well, it's like you said, it's about education, educating the public. For me, I'm just more of a practical person. I'm like, from my observations through my whole life, I've seen people smoke pot. Anybody that wants it gets it. I've never heard of anyone killing anyone on pot or doing anything. I know people like you, Jon, that are very productive, been very successful in your career, who partakes. I've just nobody's convinced me of the downside of it compared to alcohol, which I worked in the bar and restaurant industry for a long time. And I saw the damaging effects and what it's done to our society and all the horrible things it can cause. I mean, alcohol, I'm not against alcohol. I think for me, give me a strawberry margarita and I'm just happy. But you know, if cannabis can do the same thing, but be less harmful, then why wouldn't we legalize it and let everybody have it if they want it and, you know, give it a try. And then of course,
it's coming.
yeah, it's just about time, and it's really
Long time
about
coming.
education.
No,
It's just about education. So
Yep.
thank you for educating us and our audience.
It was a pleasure.
One step at a time as we move forward.
You don't mind in several months now that the law is changing it from a class 1 to a class 3. Let's talk again in another few months and let us
see where we are.
how that change has affected your industry.
Love to do that. Yeah, let me know.
Awesome.
Well, we appreciate this, Erik. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
You're
thank
welcome. It
you.
was a
Really
pleasure.
interesting, fascinating conversation. Thank you. Okay.
Yep.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And now let's finish with a disclaimer. All views expressed in this video belong to Kellie Nicholson, John D'Amore, and guests. These discussions do not represent the opinions of any entity whatsoever with which they have been affiliated now or will be in the future. The opinions expressed are solely theirs, and since they are critically thinking human beings, these views are subject to change, subject to revision, and subject to rethinking at any time. These conversations are not meant to be taken as advice and are only for the purpose of entertainment. All statements may be based on hearsay and not necessarily valid proof of any claims in this video. It is not our intention to teach or advise on any topic. Thanks for watching A Slice of Life with Kellie and John.